Let me ask you something that most people are curious about but rarely talk about openly. Why do some women choose to engage in anal sex? And before anyone tightens up or jumps to conclusions, let me be clear. This conversation isn't about shock value. It isn't about judgment. And it definitely isn't about telling anyone what they should or should. 2. This is about understanding real human behavior, real psychology, real relationship, and how health, trust, emotions, and self-awareness all come into play. Because when we stop whispering about sensitive topics and start talking about them with honesty and respect, that's when real growth happens, both personally and collectively. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming there's one simple reason behind complex choices. But human intimacy doesn't work that way. Women don't make decisions in a vacuum, and no intimate behavior exists without layers of emotional, mental, relational, and sometimes cultural influence. For some women, the choice is deeply connected to trust, and trust is not a small thing. It's built over time through consistency, emotional safety, and mutual respect. When a woman feels truly safe with her partner, not just physically but emotionally, she may feel open to exploring different forms of closeness as a way of deepening connection, not because she feels obligated, but because she feels secure enough to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as weakness, but in reality, vulnerability is one of the strongest indicators of emotional health. Being able to say, I'm curious, or I want to try, or even I don't want to, requires self-awareness and confidence. And for some women, exploring different aspects of intimacy is part of understanding their own body and their own boundaries. Curiosity isn't a flaw, it's a natural human trait. And curiosity about intimacy doesn't automatically mean dissatisfaction or instability. It often means someone is learning what feels right for them and what doesn't, which is an important part of personal growth. Another key factor is communication, and this is where health really enters the conversation, because healthy intimacy is built on honest dialogue, not assumptions, not pressure, not silence, but real conversations where both partners feel heard, respected, and valued. When a woman feels she can talk openly about desires, limits, fears, and comfort levels without being judged or dismissed, her choices become intentional rather than reactive, and intentional choices are always healthier than choices driven by fear, manipulation, or expectation. There's also the element of autonomy, and autonomy is deeply tied to mental well-being. Making a decision because it feels right to you, rather than because you feel you have to, is empowering, and empowerment plays a major role in sexual confidence, self-esteem, and emotional balance. When a woman feels ownership over her body and her choices, it can positively impact how she carries herself not just in relationships but in daily life. Confidence in one area often spills over into other areas like communication, boundaries, and self-respect. We also can't ignore the role of relationships themselves. Every relationship has its own dynamic, values, and rhythm. For some couples, exploring different forms of intimacy is part of maintaining closeness, novelty, and emotional connection. Long-term relationships especially require effort to stay emotionally and physically engaged. And for some women, participation in certain acts is less about the act itself and more about shared experience, bonding, and mutual exploration. When done with care and respect, shared experiences can strengthen emotional ties rather than weaken them. At the same time, it's important to talk honestly about influence, because no one lives outside of culture, media, or social narratives. Movies, online content, conversations among peers, and even misinformation can shape perceptions of what intimacy is supposed to look like. And sometimes these influences create unrealistic expectations or quiet pressure, which is why education matters so much. When people understand anatomy, safety, consent, and emotional readiness, they're far more equipped to make decisions that support both physical and mental health. From a health perspective, awareness is everything. Understanding your body, understanding risks, understanding hygiene, and understanding communication are all part of responsible intimacy. Health isn't just about the absence of disease, it's about feeling safe, respected, and emotionally stable, and any intimate behavior that ignores these factors can create stress, anxiety, or even physical harm, which is why no choice is truly healthy unless it's informed and voluntary. There's also a psychological side that doesn't get discussed enough. Some women find that exploring intimacy in new ways helps them overcome past shame, fear, or rigid beliefs about their bodies. And this doesn't mean they're broken or trying to prove something. It can mean they're reclaiming control, redefining pleasure on their own terms, and separating their identity from outdated or imposed narratives. Mental health improves when people feel free to define themselves rather than conform to expectations. But here's where the conversation needs balance. Because not every reason is positive, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. Some women engage in acts they're not fully comfortable with because they fear losing a partner, being judged, or being seen as inadequate. And this is where things can turn unhealthy. Any form of intimacy rooted in fear, pressure, or obligation can slowly erode self-worth. Even if it looks consensual on the surface, internal conflict shows up later as stress, resentment, or emotional distance. That's why self-honesty is critical. Being able to check in with yourself and ask, am I doing this because I want to or because I feel I have to, is a powerful act of self-care. And this applies far beyond intimacy. It applies to work, friendships, family dynamics, and daily habits. When choices align with values, people feel lighter, more confident, and more grounded. When choices conflict with values, the body and mind usually signal it through discomfort or anxiety. Another overlooked reason is the desire to please a partner, and before that gets misunderstood. Wanting to please someone you care about isn't inherently unhealthy. Mutual pleasure and consideration are part of strong relationships. The issue arises when pleasing someone else consistently comes at the cost of your own comfort or well-being. Healthy relationships involve give and take, not sacrifice of self, and recognizing that line is essential for long-term emotional health. There's also the aspect of trust building. For some women, engaging in deeply intimate acts is a way of reinforcing emotional closeness. It can feel like a shared secret or a symbol of connection. And while this can be meaningful, it only remains healthy when trust flows both ways. Trust means listening, respecting boundaries, and being willing to stop or change course without resentment. When trust becomes conditional, intimacy loses its safety. Let's talk about boundaries for a moment, because boundaries are not barriers. They're guidelines for healthy interaction. Women who feel confident setting boundaries tend to have better mental health and stronger relationships. Whether a woman chooses to explore or chooses not to, the ability to say yes or no without guilt is a sign of emotional strength, and partners who respect boundaries contribute to a safer, more supportive environment. It's also worth mentioning that preferences can change over time. And that's normal. What feels right at one stage of life may not feel right at another. And growth often involves reassessing choices, honoring new boundaries, and letting go of old expectations. Emotional maturity allows space for change without shame or pressure. And that flexibility is a key component of healthy relationships. From a broader health and fitness perspective, emotional health directly impacts physical health. Chronic stress, anxiety, and unresolved emotional conflict can affect sleep, hormones, energy levels, and even immune function, so conversations about intimacy are not separate from health. They're part of it. When people feel aligned in their choices, their bodies often respond with better balance and resilience. And here's something many people don't talk about. Respect for individual differences is essential. Some women are curious, some are not, some try and decide it's not for them. Others feel it strengthens their bond. None of these outcomes define a person's worth, character, or morality. Understanding this reduces unnecessary shame and comparison, which are major sources of mental stress in modern life. When we replace judgment with understanding, people feel safer to speak honestly. And when people speak honestly, they make healthier decisions. Silence often breeds misinformation, and misinformation can lead to harm, whether physical or emotional. Open dialogue supported by education creates space for better outcomes across the board. So when this topic comes up, instead of asking why as a form of criticism, it's more productive to ask why as a form of curiosity and compassion. Curiosity opens doors to learning. Compassion strengthens relationships. And both are essential for overall well-being. Intimacy should never feel like a performance or an obligation. It should feel like a shared experience rooted in mutual care and respect. If there's anything you take from this conversation, let it be the understanding that health is holistic. It includes body, mind, emotions, and relationships. And any choice that supports alignment between those areas is more likely to lead to long-term satisfaction and peace. When people feel informed, respected, and empowered, they're better equipped to build relationships that nourish rather than drain them. And that mindset carries into every part of life, from how you communicate to how you care for yourself to how you show up for others. And that awareness, that willingness to understand rather than judge, is where real strength and healthier living begin. Especially when you remember that every individual's journey is different, every choice carries its own context. And true well-being grows when we allow space for honest conversation, personal autonomy, and mutual respect, without forcing a single narrative on everyone, because at the end of the day, the healthiest decision is the one made with clarity, consent, and self-respect, supported by communication, knowledge, and care, while continuing to listen to your own body, your own emotions, and the signals they send as you move forward in life, relationships, and personal growth. Staying aware, staying grounded, and staying true to what genuinely feels right for you, your health, and your future. Even as circumstances evolve and understanding deepens, allowing room for reflection, change, and ongoing learning as part of a balanced and conscious approach to well-being, intimacy, and self-awareness, without rushing to label, conclude, or define anyone by a single choice or moment, but instead recognizing the ongoing process of growth that shapes who we are becoming, day by day, experience by experience, choice by choice, as long as those choices come from a place of awareness, respect, and genuine intention, rather than fear or pressure, and that awareness continues to guide how we engage, communicate, and care for ourselves and others, moving forward with clarity, compassion, and balance, knowing that health is not perfection but alignment. And alignment is something we keep practicing, not something we ever truly finish. As we continue learning, listening, and adjusting along the way, remaining open to understanding ourselves more deeply and honoring the complexity of human experience, especially in areas that deserve thoughtful conversation rather than silence or shame, allowing that openness to support healthier lives, stronger relationships, and a more grounded sense of self. As the journey continues, evolving with time, awareness, and intentional choices, always grounded in respect and understanding. As we keep moving forward, learning and growing together, without forcing an endpoint or final definition, but staying present in the process, aware of the impact of our choices, and committed to well-being in all its forms, as that awareness continues to unfold, expand, and guide each step ahead gently, consciously, and with purpose, while remaining open to ongoing dialogue, reflection, and growth, knowing that understanding deepens when we keep listening rather than rushing to conclude. And that ongoing listening is where real health, connection, and balance continue to take shape, moment by moment, choice by choice, without closing the conversation but keeping it alive, thoughtful, and evolving. Just like the human experience itself, always in motion, always learning, always becoming.